17 years ago, I was the driver in a hit-and-run accident. Today's Thanksgiving, 2023. This event took place just before Christmas in, I guess, 2006. And the reason this story came to mind, the reason I want to share it today is because as I sat here meditating and thinking and praying and speaking to the creator of the universe, learning how to surrender, learning how to trust, learning how to be one with infinite intelligence, with the creator of all things, a song came into my heart and my head. And that song is Jesus Christ from Brand New. Brand New is a band that shaped my childhood, my teen years particularly, I should say, in early 20s. Jesse Lacey, the frontman, lead guitarist, singer, songwriter. That's to take nothing away from the other members of the band, Vinny and Garrett and that other guy whose name escapes me. And I realized that that song changed my life. And I don't mean that in the way that a lot of people say, you know, a song changed their life, or they go, it was just so emotional and connected and meant so much to them. Yes, that's all true. Like you could see yourself in the song. You know, many of us, when we say a song changed our life, I think that's what we mean, is that the lyrics, the melody, the composure of the whole thing, it grabs us and moves something in us, stirs something in us, changes something in us, allows us to be seen and heard and go, yes, I'm not alone. And all those things are true, but when I talk of this song, I'm speaking of something for me that was much larger, and that was that I'll never forget the day that that album came out. You know, these are the days before streaming. There was some streaming, but in this particular case, I had purchased the CD and was driving in my 1996, I believe, Honda Civic, which I had purchased from my brother Jerry. Shout out to Jerry for selling me that car on the low. I was driving my car and I was listening to that track. I was listening to the album. The album's called The God and Devil Are Raging Inside of Me. And the track, Jesus Christ, that's a pretty face, kind you'd find on someone that could save. If they don't put me away, it'll be a miracle. And I just was like, the first time I heard that song, holy moly, man. I mean, I never heard anything like that. I never heard anything that came out of like the rock and roll, alternative, hardcore, power rock ballads that suddenly came this song that was about something so deep and obvious, like Jesus. And it floored me. I mean, I couldn't get enough. I just loved it. I couldn't stop listening to that track. And so to that point, I was driving home and it was 4 a.m, in mid-December, and it was probably around 40 degrees outside. It was really cold. I mean, for Southern California, it was really cold. And I had been at the Belly Up that night, which is a venue in Solana Beach, for those of you who don't know it. One of my favorite venues, actually. And I hadn't seen Brand New, but I'd seen another band. Don't remember the band. I was working at Starbucks, and one of my coworkers played in a band, and he invited me to come down to the Belly Up to watch him. I'm 20 years old. I had sort of lost my core group of friends at this time. I was in a pretty depressed state over a girl, and I was not healthy. I was in a pretty dark place. I had been doing a lot of cocaine. I had been drinking a lot nightly, smoking weed when it made sense, but basically I would say I was in a place of complete and total substance abuse. I had to be on something in order to just go to sleep at night, because I was that depressed and in that dark of a place that I just wanted to escape the pain. And I was a young man, and the only way that I knew how to deal with that was to numb myself to just about everything. So, but this was a hopeful night. This wasn't a dark night. This was like, I'm gonna go to a concert that a friend of mine has invited me to, and maybe I'll meet a girl. Maybe, something good will happen tonight. And it did. I went to this show, and I don't remember anything about the band or the show. I just remember being there, but I remember that I was invited to the after party with the band, and I remember with all the bands, and I remember thinking like, well, shit, I've never been invited to any after party. This is fucking cool. Felt like I was in, And again, I don't remember the details of this party. I know it was down in Solana Beach or nearby, and I remember sitting on a couch and having a couple beers and seeing a couple girls who were pretty and talking a little bit and feeling comfortable, oddly, speaking to a girl who I kind of thought, ooh, she's something, but I didn't know how to progress it or how to really connect at that time. But I remember feeling like, cool. And then I knew I had to drive home because I lived in Vista. Actually right here. It wasn't as beautiful here as it is now, and I was living in the basement down under the house. But I had a long drive. And so I'd been drinking, and I wanted to sober up. So at this party, I had one beer, I think, maybe two, and then, light beers. It wasn't IPA days. It was probably 2 Coronas, Corona Lights or something. And so I went, okay, it's 2 a.m. I gotta drive, maybe 1:30 or something. So I stopped drinking. I said, all right, I gotta drive home. I'm 20 years old. I'm not even legally drinking. I had a fake ID so I could get into the venue and I could drink there and such, but so I gave myself a few hours to sober up. I never felt drunk or wild. I was kind of keeping a light buzz on, so it wasn't like I was getting hammered, taking shots or anything like this. So we get to probably 3:30, I suppose, somewhere around here, maybe 4 a.m. Probably 4 a.m. I think it was 4 when I left, I want to say, because I thought, okay, I can't really wait any longer. I feel sober, in control, and, not like I'm going to be swerving around or anything, driving, and felt good. And so I got in the car, said goodbye to everybody at the party, and took off and headed for home, and was perfectly fine. So from Solana Beach to Vista, 30 minutes. And I'm listening to this album by Brand New the whole way home. But at some point I just wanted to listen to that track over and over again. So I listened to the whole album as I drove, I believe, but then I wanted to hear that song, Jesus Christ, again. And I'll never forget this moment. The details here now become so crystal clear. It's that there's this frontage road along the freeway where I lived. It's called Thibodaux, and you come down Thibodaux, make a right, and I'm home. And I'm coming down Thibodaux, and I have my blinker on to turn right to go home. I was staying at my parents' house, my grandparents' house, sort of the same property, and blinkers on, tick, 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 the brakes are slowing. I'm slowing down, coming down the hill to make that right, to go home, go to sleep, have a regular day, you know, as regular a day as you can have after being up till 4 a.m. in the morning after a concert and a party. But as I'm coming down the hill and I'm slowing down and the brakes are on and I'm ready to go home, I just wanted to keep driving because I wanted to keep listening to that track. I didn't want that night to end. I felt so connected and I was so in love with this track. And so I turn my blinker off and I go right by the street that was home. No destination in mind, just I'm gonna drive around and do a couple laps and finish listening to the song one more time, maybe. It's 10 seconds later. I don't make that right because of the song from Brand New, written by Jesse Lacey. I don't make that turn. If that song, that track, that album doesn't exist, I make that turn, I go home. Go to sleep, nothing changes. 10 seconds later, as I'm coming down the hill, go to make this big kind of bank turn down the hill, and I was broke as fuck at the time. I don't think I had insurance. I had tires that were so bald that metal was showing through on them. It wasn't wet or anything, but it was cold and it was 4 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. It was still dark. Sun hadn't started to come up yet, but it was close. And as I'm making this big turn, coming down the hill, I'm going a little fast, but not speeding like anything crazy, but because of the wear on my tires and the lack of traction, I start to slide, lose control. The car slides one way, go to correct, overcorrect, and then on the third one, the car spins, starts sliding into a 180, coming down this hill at 40 miles an hour. So here's the front of the car, here's the back of the car, makes this last turn, and all of a sudden we're spinning backwards. And I'm obviously just kind of doing one of these, and what happens is I'm coming down the hill. I never saw any other vehicle. It's 4 in the morning. Who else is on the road but me? But there must have been another vehicle coming up, and the odds of me and that vehicle colliding are so bad because there's so much space on this road. I spin around and I slam into the side of another vehicle just like this, like door to door, like my passenger's door, their driver door, as they're coming up the hill. So they're coming up the hill, I'm coming down, I spin, boom, we collide. I don't even give it a chance to think. I just immediately drive away. Why? Everything in me knew that I'm 20 years old. It doesn't matter if I'm a 0.08 or a 0.02. I'm 20. I'm under the legal limit, over the legal limit because I'm 20 years old. I'm not even legally drinking. So I know if I stay there, I'm going to jail. But I didn't even have time to think about that. I just went boom, spun around, drove down the hill. My heart's racing. I mean, pounding out of my chest. The entire right side, passenger side of my car is busted open. Like the windows came shooting through at me. Glass exploded everywhere. I just knew I had to leave. I couldn't stay there, or else I was going to go to jail, and I didn't want to go to jail. So I drove away, and I'm freezing. My heart's pounding, and I just went and parked at a local apartment complex and turned the car off and just sat there and hoped that everything would clear up and then I could go home. Two things I remember from that moment. One, I remember that I was so disappointed because I was smoking cigarettes at the time, and my pack of cigarettes had somehow flown out the window when everything exploded open, and all I wanted was to calm my nerves with a cigarette or 10. And I remember that, and I remember just sitting there, and then I remember hearing sort of in the distance, the ambulance and the police and everything, you know, a mile off or so. Not even that, jeez. And I remember just sitting there and waiting like 30 minutes, an hour. The sun's coming up now, lightly, vaguely, 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. And I just sat there and waited for it to clear over before I went home, and then I went home. Car was still drivable, even though it was beat to hell. I remember freezing because it was so cold and the windows were all busted open, and you know, I wasn't, you know, prepared to be out in the cold in the early AM hours, and just freezing, heart racing, just wanting to be safe and get home, wondering, hoping that person was okay that was driving. And at the same time, I was so selfish that I hope they're okay, but I was really just concerned with myself. So finally I drove home and polished off a half a bottle of bourbon just to get myself to sleep. And yeah, a lot changed from there, but why am I telling this story? I think as I was reflecting, and it's Thanksgiving, and I was reflecting on what I'm grateful for, I realized that, you know, one of the things that's really been big for me of late is realizing that I'm not just grateful for the good things anymore. Like, I'm grateful for the pain. I'm grateful for the challenge and the struggle and the fight and all the things that force me to become a better man, force me to try to understand things at a higher level. And so this morning when I was thinking about all the things I'm grateful for, I just had that song come in, and I went, man, damn, that song changed my life. Because if it weren't for that song, I would have just turned right and not kept driving and not had this moment. And that moment, as bad as it sounds, it changed my life, because it was this moment where all of a sudden there was this crash where I went like, I have to change something. This isn't working anymore. I didn't have a car anymore. It was totaled. The police showed up to my door that morning. They couldn't take me to jail because they couldn't prove that I was drinking during the whole accident, but a lot of court stuff. I ended up having to do, 10 days of community service, 12 days of community service, which meant I was out there in one of those vests on the side of the road picking up trash, the most humiliating time of my life. It meant I had to quit my job because I could no longer commute from Vista to Carlsbad to my job at Starbucks, and I had to go back to working with my cousin and having him pick me up and take me to construction. Fortunately, Zach, shout out, love you, man. And it changed everything in my whole life. And it changed mostly in a way that was like, I was so freaking selfish. I was in such a dark place. I was so focused on myself. Fuck everybody. And it's very possible that something much worse would have happened if that didn't happen that morning. But that was one of these, what I call seminal moments, this catalyst for change. And it was not right at that moment did I change, but it began like this process of going like, dude, you can't keep going like this. You have to change. And that started this trajectory of me going and getting like a real job. I started coaching football a little bit on the side. I started looking at how I could help other people again. I got my eyes off of myself a little bit for the first time in a long time, and my own pain and my own misery, and I started to make some changes. And that led to, from 20 years old to about 25, I rebuilt my life. And at 25 years old, I started coaching football full time. I built a strength and conditioning program at a high school. I started pursuing all the things that brought me alive and passionate. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all that, but it made me realize that, like,